Hello, and welcome back to the Financial Dad, a podcast where we talk about everything you need to know as a creative entrepreneur, self employed person. I'm Hallie, and Bridget, I'm going to let you introduce our special guest today.
Awesome. Well, today we have Shefali Lakhani. She is an attorney and she has been in the legal space for a decent amount of time now. And one of the things that really inspired me about Shefali's work is that she has a lot of experience working with founders and startups. And I knew I wanted to bring her onto the show today so that she can give us a little bit more of that behind the scenes of whether it's complex legal issues or trademarking or copyright or business entity formation. I feel like for a lot of small business owners and entrepreneurs, these are the things that we get really, really tripped up on. So welcome, Shefali, to the show. We are so grateful to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for bringing me on. I'm super excited to chat with both of you.
Beautiful. So we have a couple of questions that we really wanted to ask you here today. And I'm sure your story will be thread into how you answer many of these questions. But I think first and foremost, it's like okay, we have a business idea. When should we talk to a lawyer? And what does that conversation even look like?
Yeah, of course. So I'm biased, but I'll say the earlier the better. I know lawyers aren't cheap, and when you're first starting out, you're usually on a shoestring budget. But getting a lawyer involved early on can have a few different benefits. So, one, right off the bat, they can be that informal business advisor to you, sort of guiding you through the process. They've done this many times before, so they know the legal and compliance requirements to make sure that you're set up properly. And they can really save you in time, money, and stress later on down the line. I know that there are a lot of cheaper, more DIY type options like LegalZoom, where you can set up an LLC or get a trademark or get contracts. But those aren't legal services, right? Those are document preparation services. And they don't know your specific situation. They don't know your business. They don't know what you need. They're helpful if you know exactly what you need from the document preparation service and you're completely sure of what you need and they can provide those documents for you. Whereas a lawyer, they'll tell you, what to set up, how to set up your entity, where to set it up. They'll get into the nuances of your specific business. So a couple of stages where I think it'd be helpful to bring on a lawyer. One, when you're looking to set up your entity, and generally, I think it's helpful to start thinking about setting up your entity when you have an idea, you're getting ready to maybe start selling your products and services, you have a website, you're sort of on that path to start launching to customers. It'd be helpful to make sure that your business assets are protected. And that's when you would think about forming your entity, right? So it'd be helpful to have a lawyer, especially if you don't know what type of entity to form, where to form it, if you need additional licenses, if you need to register your business in other states. It's super helpful too if you're starting a business with a couple of other people and you want to have those airtight governing documents. So you should really discuss, what everyone's roles and responsibilities are, what voting rights people have, what happens if someone wants to leave the business, what happens if they want to sell their shares, what happens if there's disagreements, right? Those are not pleasant topics to think about, but it's super helpful to figure those things out up front. And then when you're registering your IP, when you want to enforce your IP, when you're entering any sort of business relationship, so whether that's you're bringing on vendors, customers, employees, independent contractors, you're signing a lease, it's always helpful to have a lawyer look at any of those agreements. And then when you're raising money, so let's say you are doing a friends and family round, you're raising money from VCs, angel investors, crowdfunding, any of it, it's helpful to talk to a lawyer. But I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that don't wait for things to go wrong and don't wait for issues to arise. Think about building that relationship up front so that someone who knows your business, knows the laws, is going to help you sort of build your business and help it thrive from the beginning.
This conversation is reminding me something I did in 2016. I had just left my job at Yelp and I had started my yoga business. And I was like, okay, what do I do now? So I went to a website called zenbusiness.com. It's kind of like LegalZoom, I believe. But again, it didn't really support me. Like to really lean on what you're saying, Shafali, it wasn't personalized. It had me answer a couple of questions. I think I'm still paying for the service for like that old business that I still have to this day. And all it does is like remind me of things, which is very, very helpful. But what I'm hearing from you is that to be able to have personalized answers to your questions, especially when you're first getting started and you know nothing, which I'm sure so many people listening to the show are in that place, like that's when we should be talking to you.
Yeah, exactly. And I've had clients just like you come to me after they've used services like Zen Business, LegalZoom, or whatever, being like, "Oh, I didn't realize that I had to put in vesting in my founder equity," or "I didn't realize that I also needed to register to do business in this state," or I filed a trademark on my own and now I have this office action." So, it's not to say that like it's your responsibility to know all of these things, but it's you're trying to make this business grow and scale, and you're trying to bring on customers, and you have so many things on your plate. Let the legal person handle the legal, right? They know what to think about, they know what's important for your business, they know how to sort of make sure that you're compliant with all the laws. And I think, just as you're saying, Bridget, it's helpful to bring someone on at that point where you have so many things going on and you may not know everything.
So it's really about guidance.
Yeah.
It sounds like, having an expert so that you don't have to figure it all out yourself when you don't even know what you have to figure out
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah, exactly. You may not know what you don't know.
Totally.
Always. One of the things that you don't know what you don't know. One of the things I'd love for you to kind of go over are what are the different types of business entities and like when should that be, who is right for what? Because I think the next question a business owner could have is they could say, well, I could just be a sole proprietor operating as under my own name as myself, but there are all these different structures. What do they mean and what is right for certain people?
Yeah, definitely. So I get this question a lot, and there are tons of different business entities, but I'm really going to focus on three of the most common. So sole proprietorship, LLCs, and corporations. Sole proprietorships are helpful for really low risk businesses. Maybe you don't have a ton of clients, like you might be a freelance writer, or maybe doing some freelance marketing for
An
like your friends and
actor.
family. Yeah, where you may not necessarily, there isn't as much risk involved and you aren't necessarily thinking about protecting your personal assets. Once it gets a little bit bigger than that, then I would say it's helpful to think about an actual like legal structure, right? And two of the other most common ones are LLCs and corporations. There is not a bright line rule, but I'll give you some pros and cons of each. So generally, both LLCs and corporations provide that limited liability. So in the event that someone sues you or you declare bankruptcy or there's any sort of judgment against your business, if you've run your business properly within sort of the confines of what's required, the lawsuit and the creditors shouldn't be able to come after your personal assets. And that's the biggest pro of both of those. With LLCs, they provide pass-through taxation, meaning you're taxed on your own income taxes, personal income taxes. Whereas with a corporation, there's double taxation, meaning that you're taxed at the corporate level, and then if you are a shareholder that receives dividends, you'll be taxed at that level as well. And there are differences in sort of management flexibilities and corporate formalities. So, for example, an LLC has much more of a flexible management structure, whereas a corporation, you're required to have a board of directors. Many states require you to appoint officers. And there's sort of ongoing other record keeping requirements as well. Again, with a corporation, there is no bright line rule, but with a corporation, if you are thinking about bringing in VC money, if you're thinking about really scaling, and you're a pure startup, I would recommend the Delaware corporation route. That's generally what's sort of the best practice, and that's generally what VC folks are
What
looking.
is VC
VC
money?
is venture capital.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you. Thank you for
No, you're
clarifying.
good. I figure if I don't know, someone else might not know, hopefully. Listening.
Yeah. So that's generally accepted practice. Whereas, like, if you have maybe an e-commerce store, or if you're running like a marketing agency, or like you have a restaurant or a mom and pop shop, an LLC might be a better option for you because it's much more flexible. The taxation is a little bit cleaner and sort of doesn't have those ongoing requirements that a corporation does. The other question often I get is where to set up your LLC or corporation. Again, like if you are that pure startup, you're going to be taking in venture capital money, Delaware is your best bet. But if you're setting up an LLC, you most probably just want to set it up in your home state. We hear a lot of things about certain states having friendlier tax laws and this,
Hmm.
that, and the other, but it doesn't always like play out in the way you think it will. So for example, say you have a business and you're like, I'm going to register in Delaware, but I'm running my business in Georgia. Well, you're going to have to set up your business in Delaware. You're going to have to get a registered agent, meaning that's someone who collects service of process for you, and any other sort of mail, government, tax, that type of mail that comes to your business in Delaware. You have to have a registered agent for it. Then you're also going to have to register to do business in Georgia. So you'll have to pay for that. You'll have to pay fees every year in both states, and that'll negate any sort of perceived financial benefits you might get from Delaware. So again, talk to an attorney. But these are some of like the not so bright line rules to think about when you're setting up your LLC or corporation.
Well, that's really interesting because I'm a sole proprietor right now, so I haven't thought about like a physical location of where you set up your work. I didn't realize you could. I mean, I know that people can set it up like in a different residence that they have, but I didn't realize you could set it up somewhere that you don't even live. You have no like physical connection to outside of this registered agent that you're talking about. That's really
I
interesting.
mean, yeah, you can set up your business in any state, but then really what comes down to it is that you'll still have to register to do business
Wherever
in,
you're
in
doing
the
it.
place that
Right.
you're like, yeah, doing business, right? So like there might be reasons for you to set up a business elsewhere. So say you do have locations in different states and you have employees in different states and it might make sense. But by and large, your home state is your probably your best bet.
This is such a nuanced conversation. Excuse me. So you can tell, and like, this is where I'm seeing the real advantage of talking to someone like you, where you can say, hey, I live currently in New Jersey, but I've heard about these Delaware laws that might be more supportive of my business. Like, is it worth it? What's going to be the time? What's the cost involved? And those are not the things that you can ask on zenbusiness.com. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe you could, but like, this is where it really comes in handy talking to someone like you,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much information also out there, right? Like you can Google a lot of this stuff, but like it's hard to wade through that information too
Yes.
without really knowing what you're looking for. So again, like a lawyer is going to be like, all right, let's cut to the chase. This is what you need. This is where you are. Here's what to think about. Here's where you should think about this.
I have a couple more like very tactical questions, but I do want to take us down memory lane for a moment. Can you tell us a little bit about what was your passion behind this to go into the world of law and being an attorney? Give us a little bit of the backstory.
Yeah, of course. I will say I didn't have an amazing reason for becoming an attorney, so I won't spend too much time on that path. But once I became an attorney, I worked at a couple of different law firms doing a lot of the same work I do now. So a lot of the transactional work, working with businesses, working with startups, and that wasn't quite for me for a number of different reasons. I wasn't able to sort of build those relationships in the way that I liked. I wasn't able to show up in my true authentic self. I didn't have any decision making capability. And so I went down another path for a little bit in the tech and innovation space. And that's where I solved really interesting big problems. And I got to see what my clients or potential now clients really care about, right? Like how they think about clients, how they think about growing their businesses, how they run their businesses, and what their priorities are. And so having sat on both sides of the table of being the attorney and then being on the client side gave me a really fun perspective on how I can service these clients if I were to be an attorney. And I always had this entrepreneurial bug in me. And so it was a nice way to sort of combine these two facets and these two skill sets. The legal skill set where I knew exactly from a legal perspective how to help my clients, and then the client perspective of this is what you care about in your business, and so let me use that information to advise you. Let me use that information to build relationships and speak to you, speak your language, and think about exactly what you need in growing your business. And so that's what I'm doing now. I work with startups, I work with founders, essentially helping them through every stage of growth, whether they're just starting out and they have questions like these, or they're at a point of like growing and scaling by raising money or selling their business.
I live for this story. I'm like, how on earth did she get into this? Because I did think about it for myself at one point. I was like, I like to fight for people. Maybe I'll be a lawyer here. Hallie knows.
I'm like, oh, just remembering the arguments. She
Correct.
argues well.
Correct. The next thing I wanted to hear about, and I know this can be really challenging state by state, but I think a lot of people are going to ask the question of like, how are lawyers paid? If I call a lawyer, do I pay them for that session? Do I pay them
Mhm.
hourly? So just kind of give us a little bit of behind the scenes there.
And
Yeah.
also, is it different from like when you have a consultation versus when they're actually working on a contract for you or figuring out legal documents, like executing documents
Yeah.
for you?
So the consultation part really depends attorney to attorney. For example, I offer free 30-minute consultations. So, anyone can book a call with me, share their story, tell me what they're looking for, and I'll give you sort of a high level, I can help you and this is how you would handle it. Not every attorney offers that. Some will tell you that they offer paid consultations and they'll tell you what that price is, usually up front. So when you're booking a call with them, you'll need to make a payment up front. But in terms of how lawyers are paid, there are a couple of different ways. Most lawyers work on an hourly system, and what that hourly rate is, Bridget, exactly what you said, depends state to state, and it depends on the practice area, and it depends on a whole host of factors. But generally, if they're working on an hourly system, that means they'll work in 6-minute increments and they'll charge you by the 10th of the hour for any work that they do on your matter. So that might be like researching deliverables, preparing actual deliverables, getting on calls with you, responding to emails, being in meetings. Literally every minute that they spend doing your work that they'll likely be charging you if they're working hourly. And then some folks do flat fees. And this is something I offer. I offer a mix of both. But with flat fees, usually the lawyer will tell you the scope of services up front. So that might include a certain number of phone calls and emails. If you're asking for like a vendor agreement, that may say, okay, for this price, I'll draft an agreement and maybe do 2 rounds of negotiations with the other side. Either way, they should be telling you everything that's included in the scope, and anything that's outside of the scope will probably be done on an hourly basis. In that same vein, a lot of folks will offer like subscription services, which is similar. Again, they'll say like every month you pay me $200 or whatever it might be, and we'll review one contract or we'll have one meeting or we'll offer you whatever. And that's like pretty consistent month after month. And then the last thing, and this is largely for litigation type work, so maybe like personal injury when you get into car accidents and things like that, they'll work on a contingency fee basis, and that just means that you won't have to pay a cent until you receive some sort of favorable outcome. So that might be a settlement, that might be trial, depending on sort of your agreement with the attorneys.
Wow, I didn't realize it was a tenth of an hour. So you have to be really on top of what you do every minute that you're working so that you know where to charge it to.
Yeah, it's a pain, I'll say. And it's like the flat fee situation is I think often beneficial both to lawyers and the clients because it provides sort of that consistency and the like the price up front, right? So you don't have to be thinking on every single minute of billing.
Mm-hmm.
You say, all right, I just need to do this work and this will cost me a flat fee of X amount.
Yeah, versus being like, oh, if it took longer, it
Yeah.
might cost more than you
Yeah.
expect. And then that's more work for you to just figure out what even you spent your time on.
Yeah. I mean, running a law firm and not even running, but even being a lawyer is so much admin work and like billing, for example, is like a huge administrative lift for so many attorneys.
Yeah, I was really inspired by the way that you do structure your packages, and I appreciated the transparency of like, this is what's included, because I did know a little bit about this whole hourly or like minute by minute thing. And to me, as the person on the receiving end of that, it's like, well, I have no idea how long this is going to take.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of a la carte things, I would assume, based on that conversation or that initial fee. So yeah, I appreciate that. And this is just good knowledge for everyone to know, because I do think this is one of those industries that's kind of behind the curtain. And most small business owners, founders, people with the dreams and the ideas, they're not thinking this. They did not maybe even go to business school where they took any of these classes. So I appreciate that as well.
And they also might think, like, in my mind, a lawyer, it's so complicated and almost intimidating, I think, to approach being at that part of your business. So I think it's really great to just, even us talking about how you're billing and how you have to figure out so much admin stuff, I feel like it's helpful just to also like humanize the
Yeah.
lawyer, and like this is just another person that you work with that doesn't have to be scary.
Yeah, yeah, and not to shamelessly plug myself, but I will.
Go for it.
But that's one of the other reasons I started a law firm too, right? I think just to your point, Hallie, lawyers can come off as really stuffy and intimidating, and even like the legalese and documents can feel so intimidating to read. And that's one of the things I hope to do is to make it seem a little bit more accessible, come off as more accessible, so that you feel comfortable working with me, sharing your business, sharing your journey with me, and I can kind of break things down in a way that you feel comfortable moving forward with whatever legal process.
I want to shift into this idea of your intellectual property. You know, a lot of people who might be listening to this show might be utilizing social media, creating creative works. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about, maybe we talk about trademarking or just copyright in general, and where do we even begin?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'll take a step back and I'll kind of explain trademarks and copyrights. But as a whole, your intellectual property in your company, and you might not even be thinking about it, are some of your most valuable assets. So trademarks protect your brand assets. They identify your brand as well as the products and services that you're selling, and they distinguish your brand from others. Whereas copyright protects original works of authorship. So think about if you're a musician, if you're writing books, if even if you set up like a course online, all of that are original works of authorship that you've created that you should be protecting all of that IP. So when you think about trademarking, it's so valuable for a number of different reasons. You know, obviously it protects your brand so that others can't copy your name, your logo, even your colors, or generally your trade dress, depending on what you trademark. And that protects your business's reputation in the marketplace. You know, with your brand, you're building trust, you're building goodwill. And so customers will come to associate those trademarks with the quality and consistency you provide. So you don't want to have to build all of that goodwill and then have someone infringe on it, or have a competitor do something similar and then provide worse services than you are. And then all of your IP, whether it's copyright, whether it's trademarks, and even patents that I won't get into too much because that's outside of my realm, but all of those increase your business's valuation. So you can license your IP if you register it. If you're ever looking to raise money, or if you're ever looking to sell your business, your IP is going to add to your business valuation so that you can sell it for a better price. And all these things, because they're so intangible, we never think about. So just something to keep in mind before I get into the actual trademark process. But generally, when you're thinking about trademarking, there are a couple ways to handle it. But essentially with trademarking, you can do it a couple of different ways. You can DIY it, meaning you can go to the US Patent and Trademark Office website. They have an application, but you'll need to know the type of application. So you'll need to know if it's a 1B or 1A, meaning like, are you already using those assets? Are you not using them? You'll need to know if you're using a T's application or a T's plus. You'll need to know how to classify the goods and services that you're selling. You'll need to make sure you're uploading a correct specimen, and a specimen is just evidence of that mark in use.
T's application? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so it's
That-
T's and T's plus. It's two different application types.
Okay.
So when you're registering your trademark, you need to obviously say like the word or the logo that you're registering, but you need to also share the goods and services that it's identifying. So for example, if you're like a jewelry maker or a t-shirt maker, you'll need to say there's like an ID manual on the US Patent and Trademark Office website, and they'll say like jewelry is class 1, t-shirts are class 2, and this is not correct, but I'm just like making things up.
Yeah,
Whatever
yeah.
it is, you can find it. And so if your item falls exactly into the classification that the US Patent and Trademark Office has created in their manual, you can use a T's plus application. If you have like a specific business that is not exactly categorizable and you need to specify like the services that you sell in a little bit more detail, then you would go with the T's application. Like just those things like no one tells you off the
No,
bat, right?
I've never even heard of those.
You need to figure out. So all of that, like that being said, you can do it by yourself, but I'm biased and I think it's helpful to work with an attorney for
Yes.
the entire process. An attorney is helpful for a couple of different factors. One, just being that, just navigating through the application process. The other big thing that they do is help with the search. So, usually, what you can do is there is a search section on the US Patent and Trademark Office website. You could go in and type, like, the Financial Dad podcast, say if we were trademarking that, and you could see if someone else has already has that exact trademark. But really, when the examining attorney, which is the attorney that reviews your application, when they look at your application, they're not just looking for exact matches, they're looking for anything that might sound similar to your mark and that sells similar goods and services. So, what an attorney will do is help you run a much more comprehensive search of your mark, and they'll share an opinion letter and analysis of that. So they'll tell you they'll give you an opinion as to the viability of your mark, and they'll share which office actions, which I'll get into in just a second, that your mark might receive. They'll guide you on the application strategy. They'll help you classify your goods and services. They'll make sure you don't fall into like the same common pitfalls that a DIYer might fall into. And they'll help you respond to office actions, which I'll get into again in just a second. And then when you need to enforce your mark, they can help with that too. But the way the process works is once you file your application, it's a pretty long process. It takes like 7 to 8 months to even hit the examining attorney's desk. Once it hits the examining attorney's desk, a couple of things can happen. Either they look at it and they're like, wow, this is great, no issues, move forward. And it goes to publication, which means it's published in a newspaper and any third party can say, no, this shouldn't be registered. That doesn't happen too often. I'm never going to say never, but if it moves past publication, then you're registered and you're good to go. The other path it can take is that when the examining attorney reviews your application, they might give you an office action. And an office action is just a question or an issue or a comment about your application. So that means that, they might just say you need like a new specimen, or they might say we found 3 other marks. Why should we register yours? This might cause confusion. And that's where it's really helpful to have an attorney do that substantive legal research and analysis and provide a response, because they'll say, oh, in XYZ cases you registered these marks, in XYZ instances you registered, and they'll provide like a full analysis of why your mark should still be registered. So that's trademarking at a high level.
There's so much there, Shefali.
Yeah.
There's so much. Yeah, we need to even pause because this is like a dense topic for people. They're going to be like, whoa,
Yeah.
okay. Do I want to go through this path? Like, I definitely need support. I mean, I think based on what you just shared, to me, it should be quite obvious that you'd want to do this with a professional because of all of the potential pitfalls, verbiage also that Hallie didn't know about as well. So I think that that's going to be really, really important for everyone.
Yeah, that's so office actions are just that, and I think it's either procedural where it's super easy fix, or it's a much more comprehensive analysis of either your mark might be confusing with others, your mark might be too descriptive, and a couple of other reasons where it might be helpful to have a lawyer do that legal research and that case analysis and write in a way that speaks to the examining attorney.
I feel like I'm just a little sponge right now, taking all of this in, things I, once again, didn't even know that I didn't know. It sounds like a very complicated process, and there are parts of it that I wouldn't have even imagined. I'm thinking this is gonna sound stupid, but I'm imagining, you set up your trademark by, sending in an application, and then you just like find out, yeah, like you got it. I'm like not even imagining the person who's like looking through it and what work they're doing to either pass it through or be like, no, you need to fix some things here. So it's just very interesting to get that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Shefali, as we start to close things out today, I'd love to hear like what you're excited about working on with clients, with founders, with business owners. Like what part of this process excites you the most?
Yeah, similar to you, Bridget, I love hearing the story and the why behind why people are doing the things they do. And working one-on-one with founders, with business owners, really gives me the opportunity to learn their why, learn sort of their passion behind their businesses and what prompted them to start it. I love hearing that, and that's one of the most exciting parts of it. And then the other thing is the problem solving. So someone might come either preemptively and they're looking to set something up, and you've provided them with the service and really saved them time and stress, and that's so exciting. Or maybe they were in some sort of bind and maybe something happened where you're able to kind of maneuver the legalities and solve their problem. So in whatever aspect, problem solving and making someone's life a little bit easier and helping them run their business is super exciting to me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And just for everyone listening, where can people find you if they're interested in using your services or just following you? Where could they go to do that?
Yeah. So I will say I'm most active on LinkedIn. So you're welcome to find me at linkedin.com, Shefali Lakhani. I have an Instagram and the handle is lawyer Shefali. You can also visit my website at www.lakhanilegal.com, and that'll give you a way to reach out to me if you want to send me an email, if you want to give me a call, or if you want to schedule a consultation. That'll all be there.
Thank you so much, Shefali. I'm very grateful for your knowledge, your expertise. I've learned many things today, and I'm sure that everyone listening is just going to be, just like Hallie said, a sponge to all of this, because this is a whole new world for most founders and startup entrepreneurs. So thank you so much for being with us today, Shefali.
Thank you guys so much for having me. That was awesome.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.